By coming to America, the Puritans found freedom to practice their own religion. However, the Puritans did not believe in tolerating other religious beliefs. People who had different religious views were not welcome in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. People who were not Puritans and had no voice in the Massachusetts Bay Colony government. They could not attend town meetings or vote for a governor and representatives of the colony. The Puritans also required everybody who lived in the Massachusetts Bay Colony to attend the Puritan church and behave in Puritan ways. That caused a problem for people who did not want to worship like the Puritans or to live like the Puritans. One person who did not want to worship like the Puritans was Roger Williams. Roger Williams was a Puritan minister, but unlike most Puritans, he did not believe that the government of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had the right to force people to attend the Puritan church. Williams's speeches against the Puritan beliefs made him unpopular with the Massachusetts Bay Colony officials, such as Governor John Winthrop and other religious leaders. In 1636, Williams and the group of friends moved about 50 miles away from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in order to avoid punishment. Williams and his friends formed the town of Providence. Gradually, other people who disagreed with the strict laws of the Puritans left the Massachusetts Bay Colony and formed 3 other towns near Providence. While Rogers and his followers solved their religious problems, the move created other problems. One problem was that they needed to protect themselves from unfriendly Native Americans who did not want a growing English population spreading through their territory. The town of Providence and the 3 other towns wanted to form a colony, but they needed England's permission to do this. In 1644, England allowed them to become a colony. The 4 towns joined together to become the colony of Rhode Island. Like the Puritans and Pilgrims before them, Roger Williams and his followers had moved and formed a new colony to gain religious freedom. The colonists in Rhode Island elected Roger Williams as their first governor. He solved the problem of religious freedom by allowing colonists to worship as they chose. Williams believed that church and government should be separate. Because of those laws, the government in Rhode Island was composed of people from many different religions. Rhode Island attracted many settlers because of the religious freedom it offered. Other colonies established for religious freedom. Plymouth Colony and Massachusetts Bay Colony were formed by people looking for a place that allowed them to practice their own religion without getting in trouble. Those people found the religious freedom they desired. However, they did not extend religious freedom to everyone. Because of that intolerance, other colonies, such as Rhode Island, were also formed by people looking for religious freedom. The Connecticut colony was formed by colonists who also left Massachusetts in search of religious freedom from the Puritan Church. They settled in the fertile farmland of the Connecticut Valley in 1636. New Hampshire was selected by another group of people who left Massachusetts in 1638. They formed their own colony because they disagreed with the Puritan Church. Religious freedom was an important value in colonies such as New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Later, Pennsylvania was formed as a colony where people of the Quaker religion could settle and find religious freedom. Maryland, which was founded as an English Catholic, Lord Baltimore attracted new colonists by its policy of religious toleration and freedom. More religious freedom developed in the English colonies than anywhere in Europe at that time. The Puritan worldview. Similar views of Native Americans and Puritans. The worldviews of early colonists strongly influenced the culture that developed in the colonies. The Puritans had a complicated worldview that shaped the practices in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Like Native Americans, the Puritans believed in a God creator and the importance of the relationship of human beings to God, nature, and the universe. Just like many Native Americans, the Puritans placed the relationship between the spiritual world and the material world at the center of human life and knowledge. Also, like Native Americans, the Puritans struggled to understand how they might know God's will, what God wanted from each person. Different views of Native Americans and Puritans. The Puritans' belief about the relationship between God and people differed from that of the Native Americans. The Puritans believed that human beings differed from all other creatures because God had given them a special form of understanding. The Puritans believed human beings were conscious, aware of all the thoughts inside them, while animals were not. God, therefore, had given people dominion or control over animals and plants. People were commanded to use nature in a productive way, such as clearing lands of trees so it could be farmed. Puritans believed people who did not use nature productively were going against God's will. In contrast, or the opposite, Native Americans tried to understand how the Great Spirit expected each person in his or her particular view to bring harmony to nature. Native Americans would travel to a religious place in a natural setting to receive a vision that showed their mission in life. Puritans, however, did not look for God's truth in nature, but in using their hands and minds. Puritans believed that God required that they use nature productively and better their minds through reading the Bible. Puritan religious beliefs. As Christians, the Puritans believed that God had sent his son Jesus to earth to teach people how to eliminate evil from their everyday lives and from religious practices. The Puritans believed that God knew everything and had control over everything, yet God also expected each person to make moral choices. When important personal and political decisions were to be made, men and women had to ask themselves what God would expect them to do. When the colony's leaders had to make decisions about going to war, they might call for a day of fasting or not eating and prayer to gain God's guidance. The Puritans asked advice from their ministers on all major decisions. According to the Puritans' worldview, the value or meaning of a person's life would be known at a day of judgment. For individuals, this usually meant on the day when a person died. The Puritans also believed that God had a final day of judgment for humanity, when those who had been chosen by God for salvation would take their place with God in heaven, and all others would be punished. Puritans and education. The Puritans placed so much importance on understanding God's will that one of the first colleges they created was Harvard College. Here they trained their most promising young men as ministers. These men were believed to have been selected or called by God to interpret his will. Harvard was founded in 1636, only 6 years after the Puritans arrived in Massachusetts. Most of the other colleges founded in the colonies, such as William and Mary in Virginia and Yale in Connecticut, were also created by churches to train ministers. Sermons by famous ministers given on major holidays such as Easter were major events in the cultural history of Massachusetts and Connecticut. Puritans and religious freedom. The Puritans felt that people who did not believe the way they did were mistaken and should not live in Puritan community. Puritans who did not follow God's will as expressed by the ministers were believed to be under the control of an evil force, Satan, the devil. Those people were believed to be possessed or controlled by Satan and were called witches. These people were sometimes tried in a religious court and put to death. To the Puritans, Native Americans who had no knowledge of Christianity and whose lives seemed simple were considered savages, people who did not know how to live properly. The Puritans tried to convert the Native Americans. Native Americans who had converted to Christianity were settled in special praying towns.